Good evening, and thank you all for joining us on our virtual visit to Kirstenbosch Botanical Garden in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm particularly delighted to have scheduled this visit. Not only is Kirstenbosch one of my favourite gardens in all of the world, it is a truly unique place for its majestic setting, its illustrious history, and its botanic pedigree, representing the Cape Floral Kingdom, which we all know to be one of the richest on the planet. Alice Notten will be our guide this evening. Alice has a background in botany, horticulture and zoology and has worked at Kirstenbosch since 1992 as Environmental Interpretation Officer. So who better than to be our guide? She will show us where the garden is located, talk about climate and seasons, rainfall and water, geology and soil, the garden's history and its founding ideas. Then she'll take us on a virtual tour of the garden, showing the beauty of its landscape and the diversity of its plants and wildlife. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us, Alice. It's a very great pleasure to have you with us, and a big welcome from all of us. If you'd like to share your screen now, please.
Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. Well done. Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, well, yeah, I'm now officially part of the furniture at Kirstenbosch, having been here so long. I think sometimes I forget, when you've been there, you just are part of it. So yeah, anyway, I do love the place. And yeah, so I hope I can do it justice. So Kirstenbosch is in Cape Town, and Cape Town is, of course, on the southern tip of Africa, where you can see how much of the country is quite desert, semi-desert or desert. So we are where the green starts, more or less, in South Africa, on the southwestern Cape, on a narrow peninsula that juts out into the Atlantic Ocean. And we are situated on the east-facing slopes of Table Mountain, which is the Table Mountain chain runs from Table Bay right down to Cape Point. So that the location does, what is the word? Dictate a lot of Kirstenbosch's climate, and the peninsula is famous for 4 seasons in a day, and very different situation from the west to the east to the north to the south, wherever you are, and of course up against the mountain or out on the flats. It's quite a diverse kind of environment. So that is an aerial map of the garden, which is difficult to gauge. The garden itself is 36 hectares, and we are part of a larger estate. And the part that is not gardened is run as a natural area or protected area. It used to be called a nature reserve, but nowadays it's a protected area. So we run from the garden up onto the slopes. Yeah. So that is a close-up of the garden. And that is a bit more familiar sort of aerial shot, although taken a few years ago. And you can see we have a irrigation dam that on the slopes above the garden. Otherwise, we would not be as green during the summer months. So welcome to Kirstenbosch. So Kirstenbosch is located 13 kilometers from the center of Cape Town. We are one of the top tourist attractions in Cape Town, so we're quite well signposted. And we have a tourist bus that even comes past, I forget how many times, I think it's 6 times a day during season, part of a tour. So if you buy the ticket, then you can hop off at Kirstenbosch and spend an hour or 3 and then hop back on and continue the tour. It works very well and is very well attended and quite popular. And we also, of course, nowadays you've got Ubers and taxis and things. And we also do charge an entry fee, where at the moment it's up to $2.30 for an adult, with discounts for local people, sort of Southern African people, Northern African. It's very confusing, but it's all written down on the website. But when you do visit Kirstenbosch, if you are a South African citizen, be sure to bring your driver's license or passport to get the discount. And also, although Kirstenbosch is steep, we do try to be as wheelchair and pushchair friendly as possible. And all the visitor facilities are wheelchair accessible, but it's not exactly a wheelchair friendly garden in that it is very steep. So you need a very strong and able pusher if you are to visit all parts of the garden. And when you pull up to Kirstenbosch, our mountain backdrop is very much a feature of the garden. And that what we call Castle Rock particularly has become emblematic of the garden. And this is our main gate in summertime when the Pride of the Carp is flowering. Really beautiful, one of my favorites, but it is definitely not for smaller gardens. So this is our mountain backdrop, which dictates our climate and our soil and everything. So that's our Castle Rock, Fernwood Peak. That also referred to as the eastern buttress. If you picture that as like the eastern end of the table. So if you were to climb up on top, you would come out on this long flat thing. So Table Mountain itself faces due north, well, pretty much close. And we are on the eastern slopes, and then Devil's Peak on the right there. And 4 streams run off the mountain. Falcut actually doesn't come through the garden. It flows into False Bay, but Nursery, Skeleton, and Window all flow through the garden. And the water here is tannin stained, so it's all rather tea-colored. And when it is agitated, it gets quite foamy, looks polluted, but it actually is just natural tannins that make the water like that. And it is drinkable, but I wouldn't drink it anymore because it's just too populated. But in the old days, it was perfectly potable. And the way to tell if you are ever concerned about whether it's soap or whether it's just tannin foam is just smell it. And it's got a lovely earthy smell, whereas if it was polluted, you would smell the chemical or the soapy smell.
Can I ask where the tannin derives from? Sorry, just while we're there.
No, it just leaches from the plant material. So only the surface water does that. And also with the city of Cape Town, because also the water is slightly acidic. So the city, all the official municipal drinking water is surface water and dam water, but they alkalinize it, because if you have acidic water in your pipes, it shortens the life of geysers and things. It's quite intriguing. I had never really thought of the practicalities of it. But if you have acid water in your plumbing, it really does shorten the lifespan of your pipes, and particularly the element in your geyser. So then to just briefly touch on our geology, I promise I won't be too long and boring about it. Ours is pretty simple in that it's all neatly stacked. So you can see that our bedrock is Cape granite. There's a thin layer of Grafwater Formation mudstone, and then all the silver rock you see there is the Peninsula Formation sandstone. And it's the bottom layers of the Cape supergroup. So we're not by no means the tallest on the Cape Fold Belt. In fact, we're quite a low mountain. Our highest peak is only 1,000 odd meters, and our top of Skeleton is about 900. I'm afraid I don't know that in feet. I apologize. And yeah, so the highest points, if you find the higher, I think it's one year series, its name is not coming into my head. There are quite a few more layers above it into the Bokkerveld shales and things which have fossils. So our mountain is actually exceedingly ancient, and it was laid down like 500 million years ago. And when it was first formed, it was like the Rockies. It was like 4 kilometers high. So all this is just the remains of years and millions of years of erosion. So we've been in an erosion phase for a long, long time. So our soils are exceedingly leached and poor. One of the features of the Fynbos is that the soil is acidic and really, really nutrient poor. Sometimes it's basically, especially on the sandstone soils are just literally like pure sand. Whereas, yeah, Kirstenbosch is on the granite. So the cliffs above us are the sandstone, which is a very hard and durable rock. And most of the weathering is done by what they call overhang collapse, where the underlayers of the mudstones wear away in the granite. And eventually these giant boulders just crash down. So our slopes are littered with stones of varying sizes, some of them really huge. And although I haven't personally witnessed this happen, but when they do fall, it is quite a thing. And they cut a swathe through the forest, and it's quite exciting. And I think there was one medium-sized one fell about 10 years ago, and it sounded like an earthquake, according to the guy that lives on the property. So that is a massive rock. So we have a lot of those on our estate. And then this is the mudstone, which is the thin layer, the grafwater, which is really intriguing because if you look, you can see it's got fossilized remnants of the mud crack and the ripple patterns, which is really cool. And the soil from the shale is a slightly better soil than the sandstone. And Fynbos is very fussy about soil. So if you walk in the wild areas, you can see sometimes the Fynbos will change. The species and plants that grow in the shale are different from the ones that grow in the sandstone. And they sort of like this, they do not cross over. It's very, well, very few of them do. So for us, it's not as it's only a thin layer, a vertical layer. And the granite you do not see because it's the bedrock. But if you climb up to the 300-meter contour path, then Skeleton Waterfall has washed the granite clear. So that is all exposed granite. Otherwise, it's all under the soil. And the best way to look at all the rock types is to have a look in the stream beds, which is very clear. Now it's really, really simple. So the granite is the mixture. Sandstone is the white or the pale, and the mudstone is the purples and the browns. So then also our climate, of course, as is probably well known, we're a Mediterranean style climate with a cool, wet winter, and quite short in our case, only a few months, and hot, dry summers. And of course, where we are on the peninsula, we don't get frost. I think when we get down to 5 degrees centigrade, most Cape Townians think they're dying of frostbite. We do not really understand real cold. Sometimes we get hail, and sometimes we get the appearance of frost, but it's very, very fleeting. And when bits of snow fall on Table Mountain, it makes the headlines in the newspapers. So where we are now is autumn, which is just beginning, and rain is hopefully beginning to fall. We've just had a rainstorm, which is pretty good to have an early one. We always worry about our dams being full. So I was intrigued as well how to count the weather in terms of probability of a rainy day, especially for tourists. So you have a fairly good chance it will be a rainy day in April or May. And it's quite cool weather. And at Kirstenbosch, the autumn is very much the changing of the oaks going golden, and the various late summer, autumn flowering things like the lion's ear, Leonotus, which sort of brighten up the garden and are very popular with the sunbirds. And at Kirstenbosch, we have a very good Plectranthus collection. In fact, the guy pretty much have a complete collection, and the bloke that worked the book on it, Ernst van Jaarsveld, he collected all of these for us in his day. This one is Plectranthus ciliatus. They're very beautiful, semi-shade, shade. Some of them take a little bit more sun, very soft, very easy to grow. Most of them really only flower in autumn, late summer, autumn. And some of them may be scattered through the year, but generally they have this blaze of amazing color around about now. So winter time, that's when we get most of our rainfall, and you've got a 50-50 chance of it being a rainy day. And our storms, they sort of might hang around for a week or so. So it's unfortunate if the week that you are in Cape Town, it's a rainy week, but it's just how it is. And at the average, it's sort of 225, but on our annual rain is about, I think, 1,500. And of course, we being behind, but on the highest, with the Fernwood Peak being right behind us, we in Newlands have the highest rainfall on the peninsula. So winter is cool and rainy, and also still a lot in flower. That's our yellow Strelitzia Mandela's gold. But also winter is definitely aloe season. So we have these gray, rainy, drizzly days, or we have beautiful, perfect, clear, sunny, amazing days in winter. So we always call winter our secret season. And I have to say, it probably is my favorite season. I think August for me is the best month to visit. You got a chance it might be rainy, but it's cool. The rivers are running. Everything's in flower. It's really a beautiful time of year. Those, of course, are aloes. Most actually ferox and ferox hybrids. So spring is our best time if you want to see flowers flowering. Still a good chance of rain, but it is starting to drop off and the temperature is starting to rise. And for us, we are famous for our, what we call the Namaqualand daisies, which Namaqualand being a semi-desert up the west coast, which has very brief but glorious springtime. So we recreate little pockets of it in Kirstenbosch. So we try and pack in as much color as we possibly can. Those are Osinias and Arctotus, and of course Feiches in the background, and we have Gazanias and Dimorphothecas and whatever we can find. And they do pretty well. And it really is very uplifting to experience. And then once the spring is over and the heat starts coming back and the rain starts to dry up a little bit. But the bottom part of the garden, we have these beautiful, what we call a marsh butterfly lily, but their real name is Wachendorfia. They are quite spectacular. Their leaves are a little bit messy, but they really are quite stunning display in early summer. And also a feature of early summer is all the canopies. So the pink one is the Cape chestnut, but the kaya that we underneath and the copper one, that's the new foliage. So in Kirstenbosch, we don't get the autumn foliage that many other countries get. In fact, the only one that does it is the oak, which isn't even indigenous. But we get autumn colors in spring, so which is quite strange. So a lot of the new growth is red or copper. It's really quite striking. And then midsummer is when most of the tourists come, because they come for the weather and the beaches and everything. And they come to Kirstenbosch and they wonder why it looks so dry and everything's dead. But we do try to get things going in summer. And we, of course, do have a dam so we can irrigate. But here you have a really, if it rains, it's quite surprising. Sort of, but the whole month, lucky if we get 4 days. Very little rain, and our average temperatures sort of in the mid-20s, and it can get up to as high as 36 sometimes, although we get off quite lightly. And a feature of the garden at this time of the year are the agapanthus, which are really, we do have excellent collections, and it really, we plant them everywhere. And then late summer, these are the March lilies, which actually sometimes now we're starting to call them February lilies because they seem to start earlier and earlier every year. They're the Amaryllis belladonna, which have naturalized themselves quite successfully in quite a lot of places like Portugal and I think Italy and southern England and Devon and places like that. But when they start to flower, then you know that autumn is near and winter's on the way. And this is also one of our late summers. There's the same as in the earlier picture, the late summer flowers. And we also have a thing called sage bushes, which are like similar to the plectranthus, but they grow out in the sun, with the dreadful name Syncalastemon. So the easiest way to sort of tell the difference in the seasons that is the one of our little skeleton stream in the winter when it's after rain, and it really they're a torrent and they're swift and full of water. In fact, I would be too nervous to cross that, really. I think it would sweep your feet underneath you and from under you. And you can hear them roll the rocks down the road. And after a really good storm, you can hear the clunk, clunk, clunk as they push the rocks down the river. So it really is not a safe place to cross. And then in the depths of summer, where's my little thingy? That is what it looks like towards the end of summer, the same river, when it's now just a trickle. And it's all the poor tadpoles sheltering the last little bit of water that's left. But this is a great place for kids to play. And it's a great picnicking place. So although the water was a reason why Kirstenbosch was chosen as the site, we do have a 110 megaliter dam, which was built in 1960, in the mid-60s, 68, I think, and then enlarged in the 80s. And then I think we realigned it in about 2018. And it has served us well. In my time there, I think we've only ever really got to the bottom once when we were in panic stations. But we work very hard to keep our irrigation system not leaking. And I'm sure you all heard that a couple of years ago, Cape Town almost ran out of water. We had 3 dry years and our dams were pretty much empty. But ours was okay. We manage our water. This is not unusual for us. So we got a lot of flack from Cape Townians who were all saving water and trying to live on sort of 25 liters a day in order to make it last until the winter. And why is Kirstenbosch still watering their lawns? What do they think they are? And we had to explain that we have a dam and just, we plan for this sort of weather. So we had to justify why we were keeping our collections alive, but we did manage. And as the boss said at the time, our dam, if we had given the water to Cape Town, it would have lasted the city for about half a day. So it's not a lot of water, but it was all just, but the emotions ran really high. It was hectic. So there you can see, looking down on the garden where the dam is situated. It is fed by mainly diverted water from nursery stream. This is the top of Nursery Gorge, the one on the left of Castle Rock, and surface runoff. So it's invisible from the garden, so it's quite well situated. And in the old days before the dam, they just used to not irrigate, and the lawns would all be dry during summer or yellow. Right, so then I want to go quickly through the history. Again, hopefully won't go on for too long. But back in the days before Europeans arrived at the Cape, it was the land of the Kuna people, or the Khoikhoi, where they were partly nomadic in that they moved around. And Kirstenbosch was definitely we used to come to Kirstenbosch for the spring. We have a natural spring, which is perennial, and food plants, in particular, the wild almond, otherwise known as Brobeum stillatifolium, which they would have, it grows pretty much mainly in the streams and also in Newlands area, but it does like the eastern slopes, and it often finds it grows with its feet in the rivers and the streams. So they would have collected this, and they are toxic if you don't know how to treat them properly. So they knew how to treat them to get rid of the toxin and make them edible. And Van Riebeck, when he did eventually arrive, watched them do this and tried to copy, and they nearly died from eating them because they didn't know the secret. You have to leach them for so many days in running water and stuff. So this grows this Brobeum. It grows naturally on our part of the mountain. They're very big, sprawly trees with these beautiful star-shaped leaves in a sort of a whirl, that's where the stillatifolium comes from. And beautiful, sort of softly honey-scented flowers in early summer, bee-friendly. And the sad thing is that when they arrived in the Dutch, the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, and they were moving around to the side of our mountain to take all the wood, and they were pushing the Kuna out, and they negotiated with the Dutch for access back to get the seeds. And instead of winning their suit, the Dutch used the seeds to plant the barrier hedge, which I think is quite, I don't know, mean. So this is Van Riebeck's hedge, which was planted in 1660-ish. I think they plowed it up and sowed the seeds in 1660 and used brambles as well. So this is the surviving remnants that occur, and they're relatively easy to spot because they're away from the water. So they were planted along the ridge, on the sort of the edge of what was the boundary of the settlement. And ironically, even they were pretty much, that was never really a functional boundary. It was mainly more used as a toll gate in those days because they already were expanding beyond. And nowadays, what it really is a wonderful jungle gym. So it's a very popular climbing spot for kiddos. So this is also just a reminder of what Kirstenbosch was before it was a farm and a garden. These are, of course, the Knysna people in the 20s. There were no cameras, as far as I know, in the 1600s. And then the traces that are left behind in Kirstenbosch are what we call the sleeppad, or the dragging path, where they would have dragged the timber out all the poor little ponies that they employed would have dragged the timber out. In fact, the path of Main Road is pretty much the road that was used to drag this timber out. So once the British took control in 1795, the Kirstenbosch was parceled off as a farm, and it was bought by a guy called Alexander, who bought the northern half, and a guy called Colonel Bird, who bought the southern half. And this was Alexander's homestead, or what remained of it. And though he only owned it for a short time, and then it was bought by the proteas and the Extians, who farmed it for about a little bit under 100 years. So this is, although it was in the same site, this really was the Clutie homestead, not necessarily Alexander, but they built on his house. But they pulled out, and I think they sold to Rhodes in I think 1895 or so, and he didn't use it, so it just was left to ruin. It was a very nice H-shaped Cape Dutch house, but by the time the garden was proclaimed, it was an unrecoverable ruin. And all they really did was save as much as they could from if there was anything stone or brick that was still usable. And they used it on other parts of the garden, but the structure itself was unrecoverable. So this is the man we have to thank for Kirstenbosch, Henry Harold Welsh Pearson, who was a Cambridge graduate botanist. And he came down to Cape Town. He took the job of being the professor of botany at what became the University of Cape Town, because he was interested in welwitchias, and Cape Town was the closest he could get to welwitschia. And he undertook 3 arduous journeys up to visit the welwitchias, and he wrote the first scientific paper on welwitschia. So we have welwitschia to thank, that brought Pearson to Cape Town, and he saw the flora, and he agitated and he had the political connections and will and everything to get it. It took about 10 years to get it proclaimed, and he was pushing, and initially he was going to put it, linking it to the university, but then one of his students, a Neville Pillins, showed him this marvelous land that belonged to nobody, and it was a lovely place, and he thought Kirstenbosch was the place. And he's actually buried in Kirstenbosch on the slopes overlooking the garden, and they gave him the same epitaph as Christopher Wren. If you seek his monument, look around, which is quite true, I suppose. But it's a lovely spot underneath the Atlas cedar that he got, that was one of the last things that he planted, really. Poor man died quite early in 1916. So this is what Kirstenbosch would have looked like when he first saw it. It was a rundown farm, with a couple of caretakers and maybe sharecroppers and things. And I think this is now where we enter, although I think we have pushed it in a little bit. So where that road diverges is there. So it's difficult to get that exact shot. But yeah, so when he pulled up at this gate and Neville showed him this place, and he walked in and he said, "This is the place." And from then on it was this, and then it took a couple of more years to get it proclaimed. And of course, it was a rundown farm, so they had thickets of weeds and feral pigs, and it was quite a mission. But they worked really hard, and when I read through it and looked at what they did, and compared to what we do today, we are rather precious nowadays. They didn't have front-end loaders or digger loaders or anything like that. So all of this is done with poles and with trolleys and manpower and mule power. So this is looking back down on our main lawn, which it's difficult to retake these shots because there's so much, you can't really see the land so much anymore. And then the other thing then Kirstenbosch that is very much a part of us is we use the local stone. So we've had stonemasons pretty much since the year 1, where if you come and visit, it's very obvious we have cobbles and we have dry stone walls, all of which utilize our natural stone. And those are the early guys. And just for comparison, that area where they're working looks like this today. So they will be sitting on that raised portion there. And it is remarkable to me that a lot of that stonework that was laid down in the 1920s is still good. So they really did know what they were doing. And this is also one of the things that predates the garden, is that it's the Camphor Avenue, otherwise known as Rhodes Drive, where Cecil Rhodes he planted this avenue with trees. Well, the story goes that he was hoping that he would entice Queen Victoria to come visit him. So he planted this whole avenue from his house in Newlands all the way to Constantia Neck with trees from the British Empire, each section. So there were stone pines, and then we got the camphors, and the next lot are Spanish chestnuts, and so all these sort of things. But I don't think he missed his chance. She didn't come and visit him. But the more prosaic version is that he liked the trees or the shade and the privacy, and this was his daily ride. And that's what it looks like today, 120 years later. And it is a very beautiful part of the garden, lovely big trees. And we grow shade-loving things like streptocarpus and ubiquitous Euplectranthus, and of course the clivias. They grow very well under there, although we do have to fertilize. And also a legacy of Pearson is our cycad collection. Being a conifer man, he was also interested in cycads. And the core of the collection was collected by Pearson back in the day. And that's what it looks like today. They, of course, are painfully slow growing. So that is a Lycophalatus latifrons, otherwise known as Albany cycad, which are on the brink of extinction. They're probably functionally extinct already. So that specimen is already, is still going in the garden. He had 3 quite large ones, and we have had a breeding program for many years to get seeds and to grow the seeds and to make the plants available to try and take pressure off the wild plants, because pretty much the entire threat to our cycads are gardeners. So it's awful to say this, but people that want those plants in their garden will pay a high price for them, so they get taken out of the wild and they end up in the collection, and the wild plants are disappearing at an alarming rate. And just recently, the same thing has now been happening to our dwarf succulents. So it is a bit of a problem. So we have 3 extinct in the wild plants already. This was the first one. This is Encephalatus woodii that used to grow in Ngoi Forest in KZN, KwaZulu-Natal. So ours is a sucker from one of the original trunks. So all the Encephalatus woodii alive on Earth today are clones of one male clump, one genotype, and it's all male. And we have it in the cages because they get stolen. So we've had, in the 80s, we had someone come and hack off some suckers overnight, and then just a couple of years ago, or maybe 5 years or so ago, we had a really brazen heist where they stole plants overnight out of our collection. Took some of the latifronses, 30-year-olds, from Mr. Winter's breeding experiment. So that's the woodii cones, which is a male plant. Quite show you when it cones. Doesn't cone every year, but most years. And then we use that pollen in our breeding. So to bring it up to the present day, we have had a dino expo in our cycad garden, which has also proved remarkably popular. And it is rather fun to hear the kids rattling the names off. And of course, some of the parents now, of course, also grew up with dinosaurs, but sometimes the parents haven't got a clue and the kids can pronounce them really easy. Anyway, this is Ardenix, and they're all African dinosaurs, just for the record. We have this one, and we have a pterosaur and a little dinky one called Kirk. It looks like a little Jack Russell. And we've got the one, so we've got about 5. I didn't take pictures of all of them, but if anyone wants to see, I'll happily share. So when you arrive at Kirstenbosch and you come in at our visitor center and you walk in, this is what you are greeted with. And this, of course, is taken in winter. Winter, the light is really very, very nice, although the shadows are darker. And I do have, most of my pictures, strange enough, are probably winter pictures. So it is a very beautiful part of the garden. And this lower part of the garden is probably the most accessible. It's the flattest. And it's mainly used for display. So the sort of the focus here is display. So here we're looking at the main walk and the main lawn. And to the right is the Oak Avenue. This is Oak Avenue. We call it Oak Avenue, even though actually there's only one oak left. But back in 1920, it was lined with oaks. But they weren't felled, but they die and fall over, unfortunately, quite rapidly. And this one's taken in summer, so that's when the Aggies are doing their thing. And in the middle of main lawn, we have main pond, which is not very imaginative, but it's the biggest pond. And it is also, it's a reflection pond. And we used to have lilies, but they seem to, I think we struggle with the geese. The geese are not friends to our water lilies. So we do plant them and they fail to thrive. So we're trying to figure out a way of growing them without, trying to outsmart the geese, but we haven't quite figured it out yet. It's rather a picnic-friendly spot. It's always somebody there. But I think the previous picture was taken early in the morning, so you have to be a hardened picnicker to be there at 7 a.m. And we also have a little thing called Otter Pond, which is just off the main lawn, where we have a sculpture of an otter. But we do get otters here. If you're lucky, they're not often seen, but we do find scat and footprints every now and again. So this is what we call the general garden. Peninsula garden, and it's where we plant a lot of the display plants. So it's a lot of colorful plants, and they try color combinations, and it really is picnic central as well. And in the river to the right is where most of the kids want to play. Very pleasant part of the garden, relatively flat, accessible to wheelchairs, very easy. And we also are quite famous for our tame birds. That's a family of guinea fowls. In fact, sometimes they can be a little bit pushy and invade your picnic, so you must be careful. And then in spring, the main walk, we have our spring display that I'd mentioned earlier, all the Namaqualand daisies, where we try and pack every color we can possibly find. That's the Senecio elegans and the Phaeces, otherwise known as midday flowers or mesembrys, although of course their family is no longer called Mesembryanthemaceae, so mesembrys is a bit of a anachronism. So, but Phaeces is the Afrikaans word, which basically means they call them that because the fruits look like little figs, and other than that, they got no relation to figs. So, the English translation is little figs, which doesn't really work. So we call them Phaeces. And our climate dictates that purple one is the strongest. So we have to constantly replant to keep the other ones going. But that one is one of the few ones that survives the winter. It's the Lampranthus amenus from Darling. So we call it the Darling Phaeces, not because it's dear to us, but because it's from Darling, which is a town up the west coast. And that is the view across the Phaeces over the main lawn. It is rather stunning. And the pond on the right there. It's really beautiful. And they chose the spot because it is the warmest, and it's on a slope, so it's relatively well drained. But the north facing is where you want to grow anything that needs any kind of warmth. And you feel it quite a lot in the winter when the summer rainfall things really do suffer. And also, this is also still the Phaeces beds, but we interplant the Phaeces with aloes and euphorbias. So aloes, of course, are winter flowering, and they really are right now. They're just coming into flower now, and it is quite remarkable. Especially, this is Aloe arborescens, the crown aloe. And where you get aloes, you get bees and you get sunbirds. That's our little double-collared, and one that is slightly bigger is the malachite. So if you want to catch pictures of them, you put yourself in a position where they're in the sun and you just wait and they will come. And they are beautiful and they're quite quick and they're quite cheeky. And they've got a very nice little cheeky little sound to them, but they are beautiful birds. Those are the colorful ones are the males. The females are sort of a drab olive gray. So also in this area of the garden, we have various themed gardens where we have, like, this is the fragrance garden, which is raised beds, and people are encouraged to touch and to smell. And we also try to indicate that things are smell with your nose if it's a flower, or touch, but generally people touch everything. So it's a high maintenance garden because you've got to constantly replant because things get pruned down to stubs all the time. But it is a very popular part of the garden. It's also irresistible to children. You just have to run along that it's like a little detour for them. That's our wild gardenia, which is a February flower, late summer. We have a water-wise garden because we are a water-scarce country, and we spend our lives trying to explain to people that you can have a nice garden without having to water it every day, all day. So we do try and demonstrate the principles of how to garden without having to use tap water, which we all, when it was the drought, everybody wised up and started to plant water wise, but as soon as it's back to normal, it's like they go back to their old ways and plant hydrangeas and things. So it's a battle. Next drought, they'll all be crying again because they forgot their water wise principles, but we do try. We also have a useful plants garden, which incorporates craft plants and medicinal and edible plants. So we have storyboards and labels, and it's also well used by schools and it is, and by people as well. It is an interesting, people do find it interesting. In fact, the guy that looks after the garden gets quite upset if people come and harvest from his plants. So we didn't think of that part, but we do have warning labels up because, you know, but some of them are genuine medicinal plants. And we have a garden of extinction where we draw attention to our basically extinction crisis, which is many causes, but we have a very high number of threatened and endangered and some extinct in the wild or plain extinct plants. So we use this garden to try and draw attention. It is a bit of a depressing space. So we have labels that give the status, the red list status, and the reason why they're endangered. And we have storyboards that do try to explain and what we can do. And we have a memorial to the extinct plants because there were two. We have an Erica verticillata, which survived, and Erica pyramidalis that was pretty much in the same biome, but it didn't survive. So it's gone. We've only got herbarium specimens of it. And we thought that that would be a good way of trying to explain. So that's a small percentage of the ones that actually are really gone. We also have a garden of weeds. The original name was Weed South Africa Gave the World, but it doesn't fit on the signpost, so we shortened it to Garden of the Weeds. So this is weeds that we have gifted the world, because we, of course, do deal with weeds that people have brought us. So we in Australia, and of course South America, we swap plants and create weeds for each other. So these are the plants that people curse us for, mostly Australians. And I thought that would be fun, little Shakespearean quote. And also, the heart of the garden is Colonel Bird's bath, which I think a lot of old Cape Townians stubbornly call Lady Anne Barnard's bath, because Lady Anne was a sort of a socialite who did some outdoor bathing, but I think when she was in Cape Town, Kirstenbosch wasn't even a farm yet, so there was no bath here when she was here. So I really don't think it was Lady Anne Barnard. If she did come and bath here, it would have been a sort of a muddy puddle, because this was built by Christopher Bird, the sort of vaguely bird shaped, and it is a natural spring, and the bath allows the water to pool and clear, and then it was piped for drinking water. And it is aquifer water, and as you can see, it's crystal clear compared to the stream water, which was tannin colored. And it is very drinkable. We all the water on the Kirstenbosch estate is actually not from the bath, but it's from the aquifer, borehole into storage tanks and treated with ozone. So if you come to Kirstenbosch and you're drinking out of our taps, it's actually spring water on tap. So, and it's very good quality, and it's clean, and we get it tested quarterly, and it's great. You can drink out of the bath too, if you want to, but people have been known to swim in there, and people do throw coins in there thinking it's a wishing well, even though we put signs up saying please don't, but they do. So you have to put up with a bit of frog poo, and you know, so, but I've drunk there relatively often, and I'm still here. And it's also a very kid-friendly place. You can take your shoes off and walk through the water too if you're so inclined. And it's a lovely place. It's full of tree ferns and cobbled paths and big old trees. It's one of my favorite places. I love it. And the Arboretum is another part of the garden which until recently was pretty much unvisited. So it was undeveloped for a while, where they just plant the trees to get them going. And then in the 80s, they started planting there, but we really only started putting paths in there about in the 2000s. So it's about 450 species of tree. but we don't, it's not like a sort of a typical arboretum. It's more like a forest garden, but pretty much all of these are planted. There's a few trees in here that are the very big ones that would have been pre-existing, mainly the canthiums and the cassinas. And we plant the understories and subtropical plants again, good old Plectranthus. And then our centenary was in 2013, and our centenary project was our Tree Canopy Walkway, which we've now put up and through our Arboretum, and it has quickly become our #1 attraction. In fact, in the year it opened, it alone jumped our visitor figures by almost 30%. It was quite astonishing. We didn't expect that at all. We were expecting people to tell us why we put this ugly thing in the trees, but they all came in their droves to walk on it. So it starts, we take advantage of the slope. So it starts where you can, so it's wheelchair friendly. It starts on the higher end of the Arboretum, and then it goes through and then over the trees. And it's at its highest point, it's about 12, 13 meters. And it's about 100, and it's 130 meters long. And they designed it, and its nickname is the boomslang, which means it's a tree snake, because it's sort of like inspired by a snake skeleton with all the ribs, of course, lying on its back. And it's as light and gracile and as invisible as we could possibly make it, so that it wasn't stick out like an eyesore. And it has been, and also it moves ever so slightly, so you feel like you're actually one with the trees. And it is very popular. I don't think you're allowed to come to Kirstenbosch and not walk on the boomslang. It gives you panoramic views of the mountains and of the Cape Flats to the Hottentots Holland on the other side. It's really, really quite spectacular. In fact, that picture is a little outdated because the erythrina has actually grown in the last couple of years. So I must go and retake that. And it's also one of the few places where you're in the trees. And sometimes the owls oblige and come and sit. So you can get really quite close to the owls sometimes if you're lucky. Well, that's a spotted eagle owl. We have at least 2 breeding pairs. So yeah. So then now moving on to the plants. So in Kirstenbosch, quite from the beginning, they could have grouped the plants into types, where we never did the order beds, but we did we have a horticulturalist that is in charge of a type or a group. So we have a guy that is the curator of the bulb collection, and then we'll have a protea hort, and we'll have the pelargonium guy, so everybody has, and then with that you get a section of the garden. But with bulbs, they don't have a section to themselves. So if you're looking for bulbs, the reliable spot is to come and look in the bulb house, which is in our conservatory, the glasshouse, where he puts potted display plants on a seasonal basis. So that's rhodohypoxis from the Drakensberg. And then in spring, you'll have all the West Coast bulbs. Because unfortunately, Kirstenbosch is not very good to the Western Cape bulbs. Our soil, being the granite, is clay, so it's very heavy, whereas a lot of them grow in much drier, sandy soil. So if they don't rot, then they get eaten by the porcupine. So the bulbs are kind of kept either in the glasshouse, or what Graham does is he brings them out and sinks the pot into these terraces in season. So in springtime, he does have bulbs out here for you to see, but they are carried up, and invariably there'll be 1 or 2 raids that he'll lose a few to the porcupines. So that's our gate 2, the Centre for Home Gardening, where the tea room and the garden centre are. And then this is the Nerine sarniensis, which we know as the red nerine, but the rest of the world knows as the Guernsey lily, where it grows quite well if it's wedged in among the rocks. And it is natural to our area, and it is a beautiful one. So that's actually the Matthews rockery. And there's some up in the Protea garden as well. But they do seem to survive the rotting as long as the soil is well drained. And if you get really close, you see they have these beautiful golden, like gold dust on the petals. They're really spectacular. And they're flowering now. Late summer. So that's what I was talking about, the porcupine. That was an arum lily. So we get, being part of a nature reserve, we get the wildlife, and some of it is not always friendly. So that is a porcupine. And they're literally eat everything. So the nursery itself, so this is our living collection, the nursery. It's all brick under, packed down, secure walls to keep out porcupines. They are the bane of the bulb collection's life. So that's where all the beautiful plants are, and they will not survive outside in Kirstenbosch. Similarly with succulents, if you're looking for succulents, you go to the Matthews Rockery, which is again on the north-facing slopes with lots of rocks and rockeries. So that's aloes and euphorbias and crassula and various things. So we have, if you're looking for the tree aloe or those chandelier trees, and that one, oops, that doesn't go up at the top there, tree aloe. And that one's aloe pluridens. And that other one is this, one of the Noersbome, and there's a Cassonia there. So a lot of it is also just the sort of the Eastern Cape thicket vegetation as well. He's planted there. And then that is our glasshouse, where the main bulb collection will be. If you're looking for the ones that don't survive outside, are all planted under there. And it's not a hothouse or climate controlled. It is essentially a roof to keep the plants dry. So that's all we need. Keep these poor plants alive. They just need to be kept dry during the winter. So the glasshouse is the main house is divided up into sections. So like that's the Richtersveld and the Makwaland, that's the Bushveld, and the little Karoo along the back there, and then Eastern Cape, and there's a little Namib section. And the core collection, of course, is in the nursery, but then these are the display plants. And of course, Aloe dichotoma, which is the one from up the west coast. The Aloe Barbary survives outside quite well, the one from the Eastern Cape, but this one does not survive. Parts of Cape Town, it does survive outdoors, but not at Kirstenbosch, and has beautiful yellow flowers around about starting soon, May. That's the aloedendron. They all had a name change, I'm sorry. Tree aloe. And the other one that you would otherwise have to travel all the way up to Springbok on the Richtersveld to see, this is the halfmens. I don't know what its English name is. They call that, basically means half, like almost a person. And when you see them they look like a silhouette of a person looking over, sort of looking over their shoulder. Sort of, they look like a person, like a thin person and they are terribly spiny, but that is the best their flowers get, but they are quite spectacular. Very, very spiny and really not friendly in gardens. They're the ones people grow normally are the ones from Madagascar. But you have to be pretty dry to grow these. They really are desert plants. But yeah, so it's quite a bonus to see them without having to travel all the way up to Springbok. And then in the corner of the conservatory, we have designated corner houses, and this is the stone plant house. One of them was the bulb house. We're developing a cliff plant house, and then I'll show you the next one is the welwitschia house. So here we have the little stone plants that are the tiny like lithops, but unfortunately they're not very many left. They have to do a replant quite often because they do get stolen, sadly enough. And so the core collection is in our nursery. There's the lithops. So we have lithops and Arboretum and that other little one, Conophytum. So we're also experiencing a terrible problem at the moment where a lot of these are being stolen, pushing them to extinction, new ones to add on the list. So they're not South African, this is Southern African. This is Pearson's welwitschia, which are quite difficult to grow because they have a very long taproot and they sort of shoot it down quite fast. So they're difficult to transplant. So generally you have to sow them where you want to grow them. So this was a custom built welwitschia house. And being Ernst, he went up and got Van Reinsdorp desert sand, and we have heating cables because we initially didn't do heating cables, and we sowed the seeds. They all survived, and they all germinated, but didn't survive the first winter. So we dug it all up again, put in the heating cables, and now they're fine. So they do need to be dry and warm because they come from the Namib Desert up north, sort of heading into the tropics. They are very strange plants, not very beautiful, but they have what Ernst calls it a terminally truncated caudiciform tree. So basically it's a tree that's been driven down into the ground, and it's not a true succulent. It's not a succulent at all. And it's terminally truncated because its apical bud dies pretty soon after it's grown, and then it has these two buds on the side and just has these 2 leaves that just grow for its whole lifetime. And it slowly builds up a trunk that gets bigger and woodier, and sort of on the right there, that is a dead trunk. And they're male or they're female. And they are very strange plants because they are literally like nothing. They're not really like anything. They're grouped with the conifers, but they're not really conifers because they've got elements of flowering plant. They have nectar, and they're very strange. They're sort of like they're the last of their family group that's left. So we have quite a nice collection growing here. You get females, that's the female dropping its seeds, and then this is the male, which doesn't, so they're not true conifers in that they're not like a pine. They are their own little section of the gymnosperm. That's what the word I'm looking for. So they are rather special, and I always, and when you see them in the desert, they're very much bigger, and their leaves become shredded. So a lot of people think that must be more than 1 leaf, and sometimes 2 plants can grow together and kind of merge, but generally that is just that 1 leaf that they grow all their life, 2 leaves, and that's it. So now I'm going to take you through the rest of our living collections, which are mainly in the garden. So the bulbs and the succulents, because they don't survive outside, they do have quite a large section of glasshouse to look after the core collection, whereas proteaceae, they do better outside. They're not so good in pots and collections. In fact, glasshouses often are death to Fynbos because they hate humidity, they hate soggy soil, so they really are very difficult in pots and in containers, although we do have a core collection, which they try hard to keep going. So they do better out here, but we do have to battle all sorts of pathogens like Phytophthora, and now we've got armillaria, so we do get a lot of death and dying, so we have to replant a lot. So this is what we call our Fynbos walk. So it traverses the back end of the garden, the high, hot, sunny slopes of the garden, overlooking sort of the high point of Kirstenbosch. And it is one of my favorite places as well. So we start off with a restio garden. So restios being restios, they're not grasses and they're not reeds, they're restios. So they're reed-like or grass-like. But there you can tell them because they have jointed stems. So they were useless as pipe cleaners back in the old days because they just snap at the joint. So they're very lovely, and there are quite a lot of different species. That is an Elegia, racemosa, I think. And then that little final one is they're very lovely. This is probably our most well-known is Thamnochorsus insignis, which is the one that is the preferred thatching reed that is used in the Cape, and it's actually farmed. And that also opens up a whole nother layer of threats for the plants where it's been growing where they used to grow. So it's not always ecologically friendly, unfortunately. That is a male plant. They're also male or female. Very showy, very tall. That's about 2-3 meters tall. So you don't really want that in your small suburban garden. It's better for a larger garden. There are smaller species that you can try. And they are wind pollinated, but the bees love them, the male plants, obviously. So yeah, that's a kind of a dinky one. That would be better for a garden. Bachmanii. So back to the Fynbos walk. So the middle part, the biggest part is dedicated to the proteas. And of course, protea being the family. So those are pincushions. And pincushions are amazing. They flower from about, they sort of start now. 1 or 2 species start now, and they carry on through winter into spring. And spring is the best. And then into early summer, and then it starts getting too hot, and then they stop. But again, if you're wanting photographs of birds, just plant yourself somewhere nearby in the sun, and they will come. That's a sugar bird. They have the 2/3 of his body is his tail. The female has a slightly shorter tail. Sugarbirds, sunbirds, that's orange-breasted, and the common one, the little double-collared, and the malachite, which I took on the aloes. So it's a very beautiful part. This is another kind of pincushion. They come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are flat graying. Some of them are almost, well, tree-like, but not really trees. So this is visited by bees, or the bees visit the other ones too, but also by the birds. This is an easy one to grow. And then, of course, this is what everyone wants to always see, is the king protea. So we do plant it a lot. And I didn't take a picture of it, but generally, in season, when they're in flowering, the lawn in front gets trampled to sand. So they are, every tour group will be brought up to have a look at the kings. So pay homage to the king. And they're called the king because, of course, we're a floral kingdom and they're the biggest. We also have a queen protea, but it really doesn't like Kirstenbosch. It's a high mountain species and it struggles in the clay. But they are lovely, the kings. I can quite see why people want to see them. And that they're also pollinated by the sugar birds. So one of the best things of Kirstenbosch, see, everyone wants to see them. Just wait and they will come. Have other proteas, of course. This is the sugar bush, which in the old days was used to make, they used to collect the nectar in the morning and boil it up to make syrup. And that's actually a praying mantis hiding in there. So the lovely thing about Kirstenbosch is being a nature reserve, we really don't use chemicals and pesticides. So we have a lot of wildlife. Those are the protea beetles. I don't think they're doing much pollinating. I think they're doing more eating because that's a protea eximia. Most of them are bird pollinated. Sorry, protea eximia. Another view from the Fynbos walk, looking back towards our other mountains. And that pincushion is the fountain pincushion because they're beautiful. They start and they do this whole 360-degree turn. If you had I must do a time-lapse photograph. Also, it does very well because it's a granite species, so it does quite well in gardens, that one. And of course, our iconic silver tree, where Kirstenbosch, the slopes above Kirstenbosch, and actually the ridge that used to run all the way to Weinberg, is the type population for this. And they're very susceptible to Phytophthora, so they die a lot. And even Linnaeus was very impressed with the silver tree, and he called it the most splendid and shining of plants. And they are really quite beautiful. And they shimmer. And they're also male and female. That's the female. And the male has just more flowers in there. And then they develop these large cone-like, we call them cones, but they're actually cone-like fruits. And they get big, like 10 centimeters or so. But there are other kinds of cone bushes, like this little one. Many, many species. The silver tree is just the best known. That's a protea relative called mimetes, or pagoda flowers because they look like pagodas. Also very popular with the birds. That I was actually photographing the flower and the bird appeared. So it was a bonus. And cerurias, which are insect pollinated. They have got a fragrance, whereas a lot of proteas have zero fragrance. Also the bees will visit those. Also protea family. So the protea garden focuses on the protea family, but they also grow other Fynbos plants. This is the erica garden or heath garden, where we call them ericas, but heath is kind of not heather so much. We get tubular kinds, that's our famous verticillata that is extinct in the wild, and this is one that grows on the peninsula, visited by birds. The tubular flowers are visited by the sunbirds. Wildlife in the garden, that's one that's the orange-breasted again. So there are lots of those around, and then we have also tubular flowers that aren't ericas, that are also up there. These are the chismanthe, which is a kind of bulb or a sort of a rhizome. And then we have the bell-shaped ones, which are more recognizable maybe as heaths. So this is called Erica sparsa, which has quite a nice honey scent. And then we have curvirostris and lots of other ones in between, but those are the two typical kinds. And then we also have buchus, which there is no English name for that. They're just called buchu, and it's the Khoi name. And they are citrus family plants that if you crush them, then they have a very strong scent. And some of them can be used medicinally. And the bees just mob them. If you have a bee phobia, you do not approach a full flowering plant in the sun because they're just alive with bees. And that is the medicinal buchu. That's the second best medicinal buchu. So if you buy buchu tea or buchu oil, it's usually made from that or betulina. And then if you look, they all got those little oil glands.
So sorry, Alice, what does it do? What will that do for you, that tea?
Well, they use it for kidney problems. I think it's a kind of diuretic, but they also used to use it as a mild antiseptic. So if you take it internally, it's for stomach problems and kidney problems. And if you use it as an external thing, it's a mild antiseptic and also fragrance. So if you dry the leaves and then put mix them with fat and then rub it on you, or it's like a antiperspirant as well. So yeah, but and then one of the things I do to the students, is that you can eat it. So you take it and you chew it, and as you chew it, you feel a sludge, like slime. And as soon as I say slime, you should see their faces. Sorry, I know it's mean, but that mucilage is the good stuff. So yeah, so you take a sprig and you put it in brandy or vinegar, and then you leave it, and then the vinegar gets that's mucilage makes it thick. So that's the medicine, is the mucilage. Yeah, but there are not many that you can use medicinally. Oil glands, sorry, you hold it up to the light, you see the glands. It's typical of all the things. So just to sort of end off, Kirstenbosch for me is quite special because of the ever-present wildlife. So if you're a bird watcher, we have very many birders that come to Kirstenbosch almost daily and just watch the birds and check on the birds and see where they're nesting. And there's certain people you get to know, so you go and say, hey, my bird, where are the owls today? And they usually know. So they're very useful. But the spur fowls rule the protea garden, and the guinea fowls rule the lower garden. But they are rather lovely, and they're very tame because we've banned dogs for decades, so they're not afraid of anybody. And then this is our table mountain butterfly, which is a very big brown butterfly, and they're attracted to red flowers. And you don't see them very often, but that was a lucky shot, I have to say. That's the red crassula, which is, if you go down and smell it, it's got a beautiful scent. And they also pollinate the ericas and the red dicer. And it's also fun to watch the birds using the amenities. So they use our signage as hunting perches, and they utilize our drinking fountains. It's really sweet. It's a little canary having a bath. Some people even block them, some of the birders, to make it easier for them. And we have little striped mouse. They have little stripes along their backs, and they eat the seeds. And we have agamas, and we have lizards, and tortoises, and snakes. So you have to be wary that we do have snakes. That's a puff adder. Although actually, in all 30 years I've been at Kirstenbosch, I have never personally met a puff adder. I have met boomslang, and I've briefly spotted a cobra the one day. That's my spotting of a cobra. It literally shot across the path and it was gone. And the boomslang, it was so weird because it just came across the path in front of me one day. I had to back away to get far enough to get a shot of it. But they're really not interested in us. They are very venomous, but they're not dangerous because they're not interested in people. They are chasing birds and mice and rats, but mainly birds. And it is quite surreal when you sort of see this bird hunting through the shrubbery and people having picnics 10 meters away. So it is quite weird. It is a venomous snake, highly venomous, as is the cobra and the puff adder. The puff adder is dangerous because it doesn't get out of the way. So generally we tell people, just don't walk to the beds and you'll be fine, because they're easy to spot on the grass because you can see it stood out quite well. But what they do is they blend in with the leaf litter. So when they're resting and they're curled up, they just look invisible because they look like one with the leaves. But when they're moving, they're quite easy to spot. That is a big one. But again, they're there for the frogs and the mice and stuff. Poor old frog. So we do have a lot of them. We also have various other species that are difficult to photograph. That's the most obliging. And we have moles. This is the mole rat, which lives underground. And I don't have a picture of it. But and we have the runner mole, which actually is, they live in the surface. So this one is a help to the gardener. It aerates the soil, service. And it eats insects. Whereas this one is actually vegetarian. So it is a bit of a problem. But they really only seem to muck up the lawns. And we just spread it out again and they come back the next day. So yeah, so we live with them. We have mongooses, which a lot of people really hate, but they are relatively harmless. And occasionally we spot these beautiful little buck. It's called a grijsbok. I don't think it has an English name. That's just what it is. They sort of have a gray tinge to them. Really cute. I haven't seen one for a while, come to think of it. And caracal. One year we even had one come and have its kittens in the garden. So that this one walked past me, couldn't care less about me, he walked past me. I was stunned at how big their ears are. So there's always a chance that you might spot, and we have a genet too, but they're more nocturnal. So yeah. And then if you're feeling strong and you want to go beyond the garden, we have beautiful hiking trails. So you can do the whole hike past the wild population of silver trees, Watsonias in summer. Or you can go through the forest, which is a pretty good, genuine forest. After they stopped, it's been protected pretty much since the 60s. And nothing has been taken out since even before that. So we do have quite a nice section of forest. And you can climb up all the way up to the top, but just be very aware that Table Mountain is quite a dangerous mountain, even though it's not a very big mountain. It has people die on it regularly. So when you do come to Kirstenbosch or Cape Town and you're climbing Table Mountain, please be very careful and be aware that the weather can change. You can be a lovely hot sunny day and you climb up the mountain and then the southeaster kicks in and the tablecloth arrives and you're suddenly in Arctic conditions with zero visibility. So it is a strange place. And then we have very many sheer cliffs. I mean, front of Table Mountain being one. So if you're walking around in poor visibility or you get yourself marooned on a cliff, it can be very dangerous. But we do have a very good rescue society. So put their number on your phone just in case. And if you find yourself in difficulty, give them a call and the chopper will come and rescue you. But they do have to do it quite a lot. So it is actually, for its size, and it is actually a very dangerous mountain. So that's kind of the end of my talk. So hope to see you one day. Come and visit us.
Thank you so much, Alice. That was just a lovely sojourn in a magnificent world, and your photos are stunning.
I would have put more flowers in there, but I thought, you've got to stop sometime.
Well, and it is part of your role to show us the whole of the
I tried.
Yes. I'm sure that everyone will agree with me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Was fantastic. So let me ask Susan now if we had any people asking stuff on the chat, Susan, and then I'll open up the floor to anybody who would like to speak to you in person. If you'd like to stop sharing now, Alice, then we'll all go back to,
stop sharing.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Kirstenbosch. Beautiful. Okay. It's still there.
Can you hear me,
yes,
Angela?
Yes, thanks, Susan. Just a minute. You're still sharing somehow.
That's weird. I don't know.
Press the X on the top.
Oh, okay. Leave meeting. No, okay.
No, don't leave the meeting.
Yeah. No, have I gone?
No, but your screen is still with us. Or maybe that's because I need to change my view. Yeah. Let me change my view.
It says I'm viewing Sue Benison's screen.
No, okay. Well, that's interesting. I'm going to take off now then. There we go. Well done. Thank you. Okay. So Susan first, thank you. Yes.
Okay. There aren't very many questions. I think probably because the presentation was so wonderful that we all sort of were spellbound as to what was going on in all the photos, and the explanation also was very good. So yes, maybe that was the lack of questions. But one question in particular about the lawns, the maintenance of the lawns, how does that, how much effort you put into that? And I think actually I've got a question, which is, who steals what is the situation? You said that the cycads tend to be stolen a lot. Who steals them and where do they take them
well, the cycads, it is unfortunately it's crime syndicates because they command a high price. People are willing to pay people to steal them. So the bigger the cycad, the more money you get for it. So
okay.
Generally they go for the wild ones, which
it's an international market.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think the theft back in, I mean, and also I think they lost a few from the nursery back in the old days. So then the nursery was then put in a proper fence with gates and things. This is going back to the 70s and the 80s, where they were, but then we were quite taken by surprise when we had quite a bad heist, where it was clearly a very well-run operation. They came on a rainy night and they had vehicles, and it was a police case and everything, but I think no one was ever caught or resolved or anything. They seem to come, because you can access the garden via the mountain. So you can walk in at Cecilia and just do a bit of a walk and come in off the mountain, as there's no fences on the mountainside. And they took pretty much all of our 30-year-old latifrons out of the garden. They dug them up and took them away. So I'm just relieved they didn't take the very big ones, which it's much heavier. So the 30-year-olds would have been biggish plants. So now what we do is we have them all microdotted, so that they have these microdots that you just pepper the whole plant with. And they do them with the wild plants too. So that if there's any doubt about your provenance, you take a little microscope and you look through the cycad, and if you find a microdot, then that'll tell you where it comes from. But just, so it's actually crime syndicates, and people buy them. So if you could get people to stop buying cycads, the market would collapse. So we try to tell gardeners not to be the problem. So to make sure that when you're buying a cycad, that it's a legal cycad with the CITES permit, with a known provenance, and it's not taken out of the Eastern Cape or stolen from Kirstenbosch. So that is kind of what we try to say. Yeah. So it's really so we creating the demand for them is what creates the crime in the stealing of them.
The other question was the lawns, the lawns, maintenance of the lawns.
So the lawns are a full-time job. We have a whole team of people that work on the lawns. So pretty much they're constantly working on the lawns. So you will have, when you finish mowing, so that they just do it the whole time. So you do this bit and then start where you started. So it is a constant process. So we have a dedicated team.
The idea of leaving the lawns just to go brown in the summer.
So that was before the dam.
Ah, okay, right, yes, okay. And
now that since the 60s and the dam, then they put irrigation everywhere.
Also because you'd see the snake, you wouldn't see the snakes if you let them go brown.
Yes, that's true. But also it was actually quite interesting to me as well in the past, because in the early part of Kirstenbosch, in the very early days, lawns, of course, were hand mowed. So in the early days of Kirstenbosch, the main lawn was pretty much the only lawn. The part where the pond is. And all the rest of the garden were mostly paths and beds. And then with the advent of motorized lawnmowers, the lawns grew. So I had never really factored that in. When you look at the old pictures, you just don't see lawn. It's because lawns were very high maintenance if you've got to have someone push the mower to mow the thing all the time.
Yeah. But presumably, if I may intervene, your visitor numbers in those days wouldn't have been the visitor numbers now.
No, nothing near.
Having visited this garden many times, it's just a magnificent place for families who live perhaps in very tight accommodation, who don't have gardens, and you can't just have beds, because then there's nowhere to.
No, exactly, yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So I mean, this society is rather anti-lawn, but in this context, it kind of gives people a day out, gives people who've never had an opportunity to be near nature a chance to get in,
and picnics.
And sorry,
picnics.
And
no, I'm not anti-lawn so much. It's just that it struck me as a different kind of. I never thought of the connection.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if we all had to be pushing our own, if pushing lawnmowers, then perhaps they would be retreat again. Yeah. Anyway, Bonnie Moore, is that it, Susan?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm there. Yes, just getting the lovely thing about the garden and the lawns is the fact that there are so many people picnicking. I remember that. There's no keep off the grass signs. There's picnickers everywhere, and that was very beautiful. Yes, that was something that was very nice to see.
Even on the sunny midwinter days.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so Bonnie Morse has got her hand up. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Alice. That was an amazing presentation. A couple comments. I'm in Northern California and wanted to let you know that Amaryllis belladonna is doing quite prolifically here. Yeah, in fact, it's a challenge keeping it from overtaking our garden. So yeah, we're constantly digging it up and giving it away. Yeah.
Ours don't do that well.
Yeah, so you can add that to your list. Yeah. And my husband and I had the pleasure of visiting Kirstenbosch in 2017, and what an amazing place. I just wanted to make the comment, and I saw, bees in some of your pictures. What you may not realize is it's an incredibly special place for honeybees, because you have so many old trees with nest cavities that you really don't see in a lot of the Cape because of the deforestation that happened with early settlers. But you're definitely an exception. And we're going to have to come back, my husband and I, because once we realized how many honeybees were there, we spent our entire time beelining and finding their nests. So it's a very special place, not only for your incredible collection, but also for the honeybees. Thank you.
We have a few natural hives.
You have quite a few. In fact, in our time, in our short time there, we were able to beeline and find 3 hives.
Sure.
So yeah.
We did also float the idea of having a show hive as part of our conservatory with a glass, but the safe people are worried that people will get stung. So it never really got past the idea, and we all advocating, but then the bosses higher up say, no, it's too much of a risk, we can't do this. Having so many bees right near the middle of where everybody is just too risky.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of observation hives in very public places, libraries, schools. So it can definitely be done safely. And I know we visited Babylonstoren when we were there, and they have one of the areas in the garden, although they do have it walled off, short walls. I think they had 10 hives.
Sure.
And not even observation hives. So anyways, but thank you. And thank you for supporting the bees there. It really is a special place.
Cool.
Thank you, Bonnie. Would anybody else like to ask a question? Sean Willett. Hi.
Hi, yes. I was just curious if the tree ferns were endemic, or are they all Australian invaders?
No, I think the cyathea is one of ours, but we do have some Dixonias.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ones at the Bath are Dixonias. I think one is a cyathea, but I think but I think they're quite widespread.
But they were native to South Africa anyway.
Yes, but maybe not to the Western Cape. I think the Western Cape one grows in the kloofs, capensis, but I don't think I don't think we have that in the garden at the moment. So the ones we have are mostly Cyathea dredgii. I'm not sure exactly where they come from, but they are South African or Southern African. But we do have some Dixonias there, it's true.
Thanks.
And I think it's a hybrid.
There was another question about weeding the borders. People were one person noticed that there were some weeds in the borders. How do you control them, and how important is it to?
Well, I think anybody who's a gardener will know that weeding work is never done. So each bed has a carer, and it's his responsibility or her responsibility. So the sections are done. So a horticulturalist will be in charge of a section, and then within the section they will have a number of groundsmen who are responsible for the weeding. So each bed usually has a designated person. So it is there, and then if the weeds are really bad, then they sometimes will club together and do like a blitz. But I think we're not a Kirstenbosch. We don't have a very large staff, so we definitely don't have legions of gardeners. We are for our size, we are pretty small staffed. So
May I ask?
We're not a manicured garden.
Sorry, may I ask how many then would that staff be?
I think people? Yeah, everybody, including mower teams and stuff, is about 300, 330. And at the moment, we are struggling with certain empty posts. Yeah, but and including the curator and administrative staff, so the entire garden staff is in the region of 300 or so.
Yeah.
So and in the time that I've been there, which is 30 years, I think they have whittled away at some of the teams, which is a pity. So we always advocating for more staff, but we don't seem to get them.
Mm.
So we also try to do the because the garden is huge. So sometimes when you look at those protea garden beds, that's a large area for one person to look after.
Surely.
So we do battle. The weeds are a never-ending problem.
Do you know how many hectares the garden is?
36.
36.
The garden part is 36. The estate is 500 odd hectares.
But that staff covers the estate.
No. Well, yeah, we have a small estate team, but most of those gardeners will be in the garden. The estate team does things like alien control on the estate, path fixing, that sort of stuff.
Well, compliments for a beautiful presentation, Alice. It was a lovely opportunity to get down to the other side of the world and be in that magnificent garden, and compliments to all of the staff who keep it so beautifully. And thank you so much for being with us.
No, you're welcome.
Really great presentation.
Okay, well, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, thank you everybody for coming to join in, and I'll see you next month. See you next week, Thursday, for the celebration of international meetings and 30 years for the Society. Alice, you'd be very welcome to join us in any future Zoom. We have one a month, as you know. So thanks to you all once again. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.